Hi, this video will show you how to make knotted cord rosaries. You can make them from knotted nylon cord, and they're very rugged and durable. You can make bracelets, you can make full-size rosaries, and it's not really that hard. Getting the knots to space correctly, that takes some practice, but the basic knot tying is very simple. And the finishing techniques, those are, take a little bit more practice, but they're also pretty easy once you've done a few dozen maybe. But hey, you're making rosary bracelets and you're giving glory to Our Lady. And when you have a whole pile of these rosary bracelets, you can then leave them at your church, or you can send them to a worthy organization. They're really popular with youth retreats. So if you know a youth minister that is planning a retreat or an event, these bracelets are a great thing to give out as special favors and reminders that Our Lady is praying for us, and she's our great protection and our great friend in this world. So let's get started. Why make rosary bracelets? Well, the rosary is a very ancient prayer of the church, over 1,000 years old. We don't really know where exactly it started. We attribute some of the structures of the rosary and the modern form of the rosary to St. Dominic, lived in the 1100s. But the rosary is a very traditional and very powerful prayer that has been used by the church for centuries. It's important to remember that when we talk about the rosary, we're not talking about the thing. We're not talking about the set of beads or the chain or the knotted cord. The rosary is a prayer cycle. It's a meditation on the life of Jesus. Although we do give glory to Our Lady, all of her glory goes to our Lord Jesus. She passes all of the prayers that she receives on to Jesus so that he can bestow graces back on us. If you are going to pray the rosary, you're going to need to learn the rosary mysteries, and there's 4 sets of mysteries. There's the joyful mysteries, the sorrowful mysteries, the luminous mysteries, and the glorious mysteries. And those sets of prayers are a complete summary of our gospel. They take our story from the birth of Jesus through the reception of Our Lady into heaven and coronation of her as Queen of Heaven. But it's focused on Jesus and on his life and his gospel. So the prayer of the rosary is a way to orient your life to the gospel and to Christ. This is really why we pray the rosary. I like the rosary bracelets because it's a thing that's convenient to have with you, and you can carry it everywhere because this hand goes everywhere, the rosary goes everywhere. And I can take it off and pray my rosary or pray a decade whenever I have a chance to do that. It's not essential to have the rosary prayer bracelet or something like that. You pray the rosary on anything that you can find. I think there's 10 beads because we all have 10 fingers, and when the peasants didn't have beads, they had their fingers, and so they could all pray their 10 prayers called a decade without having to have any external device to do that. If there's 10 of anything in your life, you can make those into your rosary beads. I commute to work like a lot of people. I drive on a freeway. There are exactly 10 overpasses between where I get on the freeway and where I get off the freeway at my office. Each one of those overpasses is a rosary bead for me, and I pray a Hail Mary on each of them. So this is the idea of the rosary. The rosary is not the thing, and you don't have to have the thing. You have to have the prayer, and the prayer is in your heart and between you and the Lord, and that's why we pray the rosary. So if you're going to make knotted cord rosaries, you're going to need some supplies. So here's what you need. You're going to need a spool of number 36 nylon cord. Now, you can get this from a lot of places, but I get mine from sites that specifically sell materials for making rosaries, and I'll put the websites in the show notes. This is number 36 nylon. Number 36 refers to the thickness of the nylon. I sometimes work with number 21, which is a thinner grade. That's good, I find, for making full-size rosaries. Although you can make full-size rosaries out of number 36 as well. Comes in a lot of colors. I find that black is the most popular, but you can get this nice olive drab, which matches military uniforms. Just made a full-size rosary for one of my buddies who's going off to the military in this color. Works good for bracelets too. You can get rosary cord in lots of colors, and I've made it in blue, red, brown, gold, white. So you can kind of mix them up, and that makes it more attractive for people who want to maybe have a different color. You're going to need some tape. I like to work with this clear Scotch tape. This is the glossy Scotch tape. This is not the invisible stuff. I find this a little bit easier to work with. You can also use masking tape, and that makes a kind of a thicker surface and a little more friction surface that is sometimes easier to work with if you have a little trouble with hand coordination. My dad, who was a rosary maker, used the masking tape, and he thought that worked better for him. And last, you're going to need a good sharp knife or a good pair of scissors. Now, you're going to start with your spool of a couple hundred yards of this number 36 nylon. What are you going to do with it? Well, you got to cut it into a length that is appropriate for making a rosary bracelet. And I find that length is about 3 feet, you know, more or less. A little more space, a little easier to work with, gets you some more slack. I decided to do this in front of the camera, a little bit easier to see it that way. So I got my rosary cord down there, my spool. So I want to get about 3 feet. So I just take one end, stretch my arm out. I've got kind of long arms. And about there is usually where I do my length. If your arms are shorter, you're going to want to go over here. If you want to have some real extra space, you want to go over here. A longer piece is easier to work with because it gives you some margin for error. Over time, though, you have more waste when you use a longer piece. So you kind of balance that out. What I've done typically is I'll make a double length. That's enough to make 2 rosary bracelets. Then I can end one and begin the other one right next to it, so I don't have as much waste that way. But for a beginning, it's just good to get a nice long piece, like I say, about 3 feet out to here, maybe to here, and that's where I'm going to pinch it, and then I'll show you how to tape. Okay, so I've marked my spot right there. That's where I want to cut off a piece. Now, if you just cut this nylon cord, it tends to unravel and fray, and also makes it hard to insert one end through the knots, which you're going to have to do. So you want to tape it off, and when you tape it off, then you have a nice, neat end like that. So what I do, there's my end, take a piece of tape. You can also use masking tape. Masking tape works really well. I like this clear Scotch tape because it's a little more precise. Cut off a piece about that long. What is that, maybe an inch or so? And then you're going to want to wrap it around, and this part takes a little practice too. Let me get up to the camera there. So I put a little piece on like that, so it's kind of overlapping a little, you can see, and kind of at an angle. I find that works a little better. Pinch it around like that, and then pulling it tight with my fingers and using my thumb and forefinger, I just kind of wrap that piece around, get it good and tight, keep going around like that. And what you end up with is a nice little taped off piece there. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but it's a nice piece that's got a tape collar on it, if you will. All right, so I got my little divider. Take my scissors or your knife and just chop that right in the middle. Okay, this goes back over here on the spool for the next one. And now I got my nice piece of rosary cord. A good way to start, again, if you're learning, is to find the middle of this piece. So just put the ends together. There's the middle, and that's where we're going to do our first knot. Okay, we're going to work from the middle out. So, holding it in your hand, lay it over your finger, and you're going to make 3 loops, and you're going back towards the knuckle. So 1, 2, 3. Keeping these loops from crossing up is very important, and you have to do that throughout the entire knot tying process. Let's see if I can zoom in a little here for you. There we go. Okay, so I've got my 3 loops. Now, pinching them with my thumb, I want to just use my finger to slide them off just a notch on the back side, just enough. Still pinching them to keep them from crossing up. But I've got a little space here now, you can see. So come out to the end here, take the end that I just looped around, and come up through, and you're coming up from the back and out through the front like that. Pull it tight. Here's the tricky part. You want to tighten this knot up, but you got to keep those loops from crossing. If you just yank on it, then they tend to cross up. So what you want to do is keep them in nice and parallel. I use kind of like my back fingers here to pull gently, and use my thumb and forefinger to keep the loops lined up. And just pull until you get it down about that tight. Now you're good. Okay, then you got to pull hard. This is where you're going to build up some calluses and some finger strength. So you tighten those loops down. I pull it from both sides like that. I get it out and really tug it. You're going to work the upper body here, good exercise, and you end up with a nice tight knot with those loops like that. Okay, there's one down, 9 to go. All right, so this is the middle. We're going to continue working out towards the end this way. Next loop, you want to try to get them pretty close together. And this is another part that took me a long time, getting those knots spaced close together and spaced evenly. So get that next one going right about there. Same way, 3 loops up through the back, keep it pinched, tighten them down, kind of roll the knot through, get the cord to come out the other side, pull a little this way, pull a little this way, and there's our second knot. How far apart you space them is going to depend on how big of a bracelet you want to make. And if you're going to make a bunch of these, you want to make them different sizes, because you got kids with small hands, you got men with big hands, you got women with big hands, so you want to make a variety of sizes. I'll also show you how to make an adjustable one. And that helps because that's going to fit more than just the right, or just one person. Okay, there's 2. And we keep going. And because I've been doing this for a while, I can get those knots whipped out pretty quickly. There's 3. This is where you want to start checking your spacing. You want to make sure you get them evenly spaced. You get a nice, neat product. The great thing about nylon is, even though it feels very firm and hard, it's actually flexible. So you can space these out. Again, you got to use some strength to do it. But you work them so you get them about the right spacing apart. Let's do number 4. Pull that through. That one started to cross up a little. Okay, so to speed things up a bit, I've tied some knots here off camera. See that they're nice and evenly spaced. One way that I check my spacing is, as I'm adding knots, I fold it over and match them up to see if they line up correctly. And that also helps me keep track of how many I've tied. And you can see here that I have 9 knots so far, and they line up pretty good. Sometimes if one's a little bit off, you can grab that guy and yank him down a little this way or that way and get it nice and centered. So I've got 9 knots, 1 more to go. I've got plenty of slack over here to do that, so let's do number 10. There we go. Okay, now to finish, there's a bunch of ways you can finish these things off. The one I'm wearing right now, this was one of my earlier bracelets. In fact, this one is 7 or 8 years old probably. It's lasted a good long time. It's got a very simple knot to finish it, and I'll show you how to make that. And this is a good way to finish up your bracelets as you're just getting started. So you line up your knots. You got your 10 there. They're all nice and side by side. You're going to do basically the same type of knot, but you're going to do it with doubles. And you're only going to do 2 loops. So you take the 2 ends, there's your finger again, you go around once, twice, okay, so we got our ends up here, we got 2 loops, we're not going to let them cross up, so I'm going to pinch that like that, slide it off, take both ends, you're doing one at a time, sometimes that's easier, there's one, and there's the other one. Now I'm going to pull this tight, again keeping those loops from crossing up. It's a little trickier when you got doubles. I'm going to watch my back end up here so that the distance from each of these knots to the finishing knot is the same, so they don't get one that's like way down close and one that's far away. Because I'm picky and I like to see things line up. Anyway, tighten that down, give that a pull. Same way, get it from both sides, good and tight. Since I now have a complete loop, I can get my fingers on the inside and pull that baby. You're not going to be able to break it, I promise you. So yank on it as good and hard as you can. And there is a rosary bracelet. Now, what do you do with that nonsense? Well, that's easy. Take your scissors, clip it off nice and close, about right there. Looks good. Oops. I usually use a knife, but there you go. Scissors is good. And you end up with that little end. Now, That's a complete bracelet, ready to wear, ready to pray. But like I said, I like things to be purdy, so I don't like these loose ends here. So there's a couple ways you can get rid of those. This is nylon, it will melt in heat. You can take a candle or a match and just hold that up there, and those will melt down and form a nice little lump right there, which also helps to keep the knot tied, because you've kind of melted and fused those ends together so the knot doesn't come untied. Be careful when you're working with nylon, because when it's melting, it's hot and it stays hot, and you can burn yourself if you touch the hot nylon. It takes a few seconds, really no more than that, to cool off to handling temperature. But if you've got a nice melty lump there and you put your finger on it, you're going to get a blister. Ask me how I know. Okay, I won't show you that part. That's just kind of a learn from experience type of thing. The other thing you can do, which is what I prefer, is you get yourself a crafting iron. And this is a crafting iron, aka a soldering iron. You can buy them at any hardware store. It's got the standard AC plug here, no big deal. They usually come with a set of tips, and they screw in. This tip is the one I really like. It's got a like a leaf-shaped flat surface right here, and it's great for pushing and melting the nylon and then shaping it and smoothing it out. When you work with a candle, the nylon tends to form little balls and smooth surfaces, which is nice as you don't get sharp edges. When you work with something like this, you have more control, but you tend to get little spurs and bits of nylon that have sharp edges and feel kind of rough on the skin, so you got to kind of work carefully to smooth everything out. But I like using this because the candle sometimes scorches the nylon. It doesn't show so much when you're working with black and dark colors, brown, but if you're working with this khaki color or gold or white, I've made white ones, you really see the scorch marks, and it kind of detracts from the look. So anyway, but you know, practice with different things and see what works for you. I mentioned that you want to make different sizes. This one here is pretty small, as you can see. This is not going to fit on me, but I'll use my hand as a sizer. So I've made a small one. Next one I'm going to make, I want to make it a little bit bigger. Well, how do I do that? Well, space the knots just a little bit further apart, and only a little. We're talking about maybe 1/8 of an inch, because remember there's 10, so 1/8 of an inch times, well, there's 9 spaces in there. You've added another inch to your rosary, which made it quite a significantly bit bigger. Another way you can make them larger is to have more distance between your 2 knots here and your finishing knot. You can cinch that down more if you want a smaller rosary. You can stretch it out a little more if you want a bigger one. Because on traditional rosaries, the spacing from each individual bead and then the main beads, the Our Father beads, is always a little bit longer, and that's kind of traditional to help you feel that you're getting to the end of a decade. But like I said, you know, use my hand. So this is kind of a small one. This is going to work for a smaller person. My next one will be bigger, and that'll go on to a bigger guy like me. You got to make them a bunch of different sizes so that they fit all different hands. The way they should fit on a hand is they should be snug so they don't fall off. You should have to get it on there. Now when you have these knots like this, you basically roll it on, just kind of slide it on down, and then it rolls right on. This one will not come off. There's no way it's going to fall off no matter what I do with my hand. But when I want to get it off, I can just kind of slide it up there and just sort of roll it off, and off it comes, and I can say a decade of the rosary. Okay, so that's the end of this video. I'll do a separate one which shows some different finishing knot techniques. There's all kinds of finishing knots you can use. Here's one I've been working with a lot lately. I like this because it's nice and smooth and neat, and you get a much larger last bead or knot that's much bigger than the other one, so you can tell in your fingers that you've reached an end. But there's a bunch of other ones, and we'll cover those in the next video. One other thing I want to say before we finish up this video is that when you're now starting to tie your rosary knots and make these rosary bracelets, don't feel like you have to set aside special time to do it. Like, you know, I can't do anything else, I got to be tying rosaries. I tie most of my rosary bracelets while I'm doing something else. So let's say you're sitting down watching TV, and unless you're, you know, using the thumb a lot for channel surfing, you're going to have time when you have a lot of, you know, time with free hands. So you got free hands, you can tie some rosary knots. Let's say you like to read. I love to read. I like to put my book down, and I have a little thing I just set over there to hold it open on a table or on my lap. And now I don't have to hold the book in my hands. I have two hands free. I can tie rosary knots. I used to have trouble when I was driving, getting annoyed at the people in front of me, and I could have made that red light or the green light if they hadn't have driven so slow. Stuck at this red light. I started carrying bits of rosary cord in my car, so now when I'm sitting at a red light, I can take out the rosary cord and tie a knot. And now I've done something useful that's helped to calm me down, bring me a little closer to our Lord, and not have me just sitting there staring out the window or wasting time waiting for the light to change. I have a computer in my office. I work on the office. I have dictation software, which is wonderful, which lets me talk into the computer so I don't have to type. I'm not typing. I got free hands. I can tie knots. If you talk on the phone and use a headset, you got free hands. You can tie the knots. So you want to keep the rosary cord with you. When I cut my lengths, I cut a bunch of them. I'll have a whole box full, and I'll just grab one, and I got some free hands, and I'll tie knots. So don't feel like you have to set aside special time to do it. When you're tying those knots, you can be praying a rosary while you're doing it, but even if you're not praying a rosary, even if you're doing something else in your day, you're still giving glory to Our Lady. And of course, all the glory that we give to her, she takes to Jesus, because she knows it's for him. So when we make our rosaries, we're bringing ourselves closer to our Lord, and that's really what it's all about. That's our whole point here in this life. Thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you next time.